Welcome everyone to Women Let's Talk About It Corner, brought to you by the Mom Link. My name is Crystal Almeida. I'm the CEO and founder of the Mom Link.
My name is Mary Massey. I am Director of Media for the Mom Link.
Hi, my name is Janae. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the Mom Link.
And I am Camille, the Program and Educational Director here in the Mom Link.
And together, we are the dream team. We are the group of ladies working together to bring every single female entrepreneur across the world a community of women supporting women in business. So today we have a special conversation. So excited to jump right into it. We are celebrating Pride Month. And today we are talking about the challenges, the joys, and celebrating parenting with pride. But we have a special guest joining us today, one of our LinkedIn sisters, one of our LinkedIn Mom Link supporters, Amber Hallowell. Let me go ahead and bring her up so we can jump right into this conversation.
Hello.
Hello, Amber. Welcome to Women Let's Talk About It Corner. This is where the four of us, every Thursday, we jump on here. We have real, raw conversations. We talk about things that impact women, moms, female entrepreneurs, everything in business and in life. And here, we're here to talk about parenting with pride. And just so all of you know, where did this conversation come from? Well, of course, it is Pride Month. And Mom Link, we're a huge community, even though we're Mom Link. Yes, we are a community with moms in it, but we also have a community of women, female identifying entrepreneurs. And we met Amber on LinkedIn audio rooms. And Amber, you really blew me away on the awareness, the education, and the stigma, breaking down the walls and barriers to stigma onto the LinkedIn platform. And you started talking about parenting with pride. You started talking about your own experiences. You started talking about what's happening in the United States and, the very political, cultural context happening in the United States that is actually furthering the impacts of stigmatization in the Pride community. So we invited you here today to bring a little bit of awareness and education to our community, our women of the Mom Link, and to start having this open conversation and dialogue, about the joys and challenges in parenting with pride. So I'd love to throw you the mic and just ask you my first question. And I think we all have questions here today for you, and just to share your, experiences with our community. My first question for you is, what made you get on LinkedIn and start having this conversation? Was it your personal experience? Was it you realizing the world needed to get a little bit more educated and open to these conversations?
It's a little bit of all of it. When I first came on LinkedIn, I didn't really speak a whole lot about the fact that I was the mother of a transgender son. My son is an adult. He's 25. But I felt like that was his story to share, and I didn't want to publicly share that with him. And then one day I was speaking to him about it in the kitchen, and he made this comment, "Mom, I've been out 2 years. You want to talk about it? Talk about it." Like, he didn't want me to share his personal experiences, but from my side of it as his mother, go ahead. So I felt like that was a way that I could speak out. So I did start talking about it as far as my articles breaking down when they were passing legislation or politicians were talking about it. But I still didn't really go a whole lot into my personal experience. And I had a few transgender women reach out to me, and they wanted advice on how to speak to their own parents. They were adult women that were trying to bridge this conversation, and their parents absolutely didn't see them in this light. And there was a lot of conflict at home. And so that was more where this came from, because I did understand it from a parent's view that you need to be accepting that when your kid is coming out to you. Okay, so home is their support. Home is like safe. That's your base, right? And if you're going out into a world that is currently the social media, the politicians, the pastors, the religion groups, the school boards, everybody is going after transgender youth. If that is all they hear and all they see, when they come home, they need to be able to decompress. If your parents are in your face about it too, they can't decompress. There is no safe zone. And we have this huge swath of children who are running away, who are homeless youth, who are becoming drug addicts, who are committing suicide, huge suicide. And part of that is this non-acceptance, and that starts at home. And if everybody else is rejecting them, home should at least be the place that they feel safe. So during Transgender Visibility Week in March, this woman had reached out to me, and it just kind of really hit home that she could not be the only one. That I obviously knew there were lots of kids that were in homes that the parents definitely rejected them, and thought, I need to come out here and speak about it. Maybe if I create a room where parents or other adults can come in and at least get curious, come in and listen, learn from my experiences, maybe it will give them the courage to at least approach their child, see their child in a different light, take off their biases, take off their opinions, discard that, and just see their child for their child, because that's what they are at the end of the day. Take the transgender off and they're still your child. And that's probably the biggest problem with that stigma is we have politicians, social media, you have all these people who are trying to gaslight something into this. It's a monstrosity. It's demonic. It's satanic. These people just want to live their lives. They want to go into a bathroom so they can attack other women. They just want to go to the bathroom like you and I. And honestly now, so given this whole political mess that we're in the US, my son has gone into a public restroom twice in the last 2.5 years. He goes before we leave the house. He goes when we get home. He does everything he can to avoid a public restroom so that there is no confrontation of any type. My kid should not have to worry about where he's got to go pee. It makes no sense to me. And I think in my state, we created a law that said that female athletes could not play on middle school, high school, or college sports. This was created for transgender females on female teams. Nothing about transgender males. In my state, we have 15 transgender athletes that fit this category. 2 were female. My politicians created a bill, spent all this tax money for 2 girls to not be able to play on sports teams. Now, how many awards did they take away from other people? 2 girls. How many girls are there already competing? So we're making huge, huge issues out of things that aren't big at all. They're very, very small. North Carolina was the state that in the 2000s, we tried to push a bathroom bill that said you had to go to a bathroom that your gender or that your sex aligned with. And we got a lot of backlash. We lost billions of dollars of revenue because the NCAA refused to come here. Concerts pulled from our state. Everybody was like, that is ridiculous. It's absurd the level that you're going to. Now, what was even more absurd is at that time, they went through North Carolina and installed family bathrooms, which meant anybody could go in that bathroom. Isn't that the same thing? So you created a bill for an issue that didn't even exist because you created the bathrooms anyway. So then they had to go create another bill 8 years later to rescind that bill, which was stupid. Honestly, it was just, there was no sense in creating a bill that was going to block people. And that is what you got going in like Florida. Ron DeSantis has created that bill now. Like the NAACP put out a broadcast that said, don't travel to Florida. If you're trans, leave Florida. I don't think I've ever heard any organization tell people to leave a state, any group to leave a state before. Not since civil rights. And that's where we've gone back to. And what is now being pushed against the trans is what was being pushed against against the gay pride in the 2000s here in the US, when everybody did this big pushback about gay marriage and about whether or not they could adopt and whether or not you could have 2 parents be female or 2 male parents on the birth certificate. Those things were really big in the 2000s. We've accepted those now. But now the push is against the transgender. And what they've done is it's become a hot point that they can use as a political vote. That's all it is.
So Amber, if I can jump in, you said a few really important points. And I do see, we made so much progress. And as of late, we have seen us take some really major steps back.
Right.
And one of them, something you touched upon in the very beginning of your conversation and talking about your own parenting experience with your son, was the disclosure piece. And I think this is a huge problem in our society. We feel free to disclose people's gender, sexuality. We feel free just because someone shared that with us. And I think this is a huge piece in parenting, and the message that you're providing to other parents is, is it our right to go and share with the rest of the world without asking permission? And the answer is no. It is not permission, right?
And I mean, it's their story. It's their story. Just like it's our story to tell ours, that is their story to tell whoever they want to share that information with. And as political and as extreme as our culture is right now, anytime you share that piece, you're running a risk depending on what company you keep. We have to worry about whether or not when he walks into a store, if someone's going to judge him. We had someone who was actually targeted because they were gay and murdered in a public restroom about a quarter of a mile from a store that my son walked into 4 days later and was called out in. And he won't go back in that store because that was just too big of a... We're in a very red county. I'm in a county that does not support pride. And people here very, like you said, they're very willing to call out. And it's not that they want to share somebody's information. They feel the right to ask someone that personal information. And that's where we've moved to. We've moved to this. I'm like, we're seeing reports now of, and it may have happened in Canada. There was a boy who the mother had walked into the restroom. He's an adult, but he is highly functioning autism. And she had walked him into a public restroom and they thought that he was a trans and had both the mother and this autistic son arrested. We've had another one where there was a 9-year-old who had a short haircut, little girl, and 2 people who weren't even with the school district walked onto the baseball or the softball field and demanded to see her birth certificate because they didn't think she was female, even though she was, and her parents were right there. And that is we've crossed this threshold of getting in other people's personal space and whether or not it's okay for you to ask those questions. And I don't think it's okay for people to ask those questions. Again, I don't share that information about my son because that's his to share with who he wants. I talk about my experiences, my fears. And that probably was the biggest thing for me was fear when my son came out because I knew the culture that we're in. I knew the backlash that people already were getting before he even came out to me and said, yeah, Mom, I'm trans. And I had suspected for a couple of years before that. And honestly, my son had always, tomboy wasn't even the right word. So it just made sense when he came out as an adult. It made perfect sense to me that he was trans. And it was very easy for me to take off that label or that box. You have people, you have an idea of what your child's going to be, whether it's going to be a doctor or a teacher.
I'm gonna jump in real quick because we're saying words where we're assuming people understand. And I don't want to assume that people understand what trans means to you may means different to someone else. So when you say trans, what exactly are you saying?
Okay. Transgender means that they pretty much, they identify as anything other than male or female. It could be that they feel non-binary. It could mean that they feel asexual. It could mean that they're intersexed. It could mean that they're transgender, which is my son. And my son, what that means is he was assigned female at birth, but he has always felt he's a male. And so when you say transgender male, you're talking about someone who wants to become a male. If you're talking about transgender female, you're talking about someone who wants to become a female. My son has always identified as a male.
So I wanted to be clear because I'm going to tell you, for me personally and people in my group, when we're growing up, transgender for us meant watching a male become a female and like total transition with the hormones included and everything, like they're going through the process of it. Like I have friends.
It doesn't have to be that way anymore. I will say that. Like that is something that people,
so
I think it depends on the individual. Like if you are, my son takes hormone. My son plans to have a gender neutral chest at some point. Past that, whenever, if, maybe, doesn't care. That's not his priority. His priority is that he feels and looks like a male. And right now, the things up top keep him from feeling that way. He has to bind that down. And so that is something that every day is this, I don't feel like a male.
So I want to play
He's
devil's
got the
advocate.
beard. He's got the beard. So he's looking in the mirror and he knows he's a man, but that keeps him from being there. So that for him needs to be removed, but the rest of it doesn't have to be. And that is different for everybody. Some people don't even need the hormones. Some people just don't feel like what they were born with. And I don't think there's not like a big mental, I know that we hear that there's this big, it's a mental illness. It's not a mental illness. My son is not crazy. My son is as sane as he can be, has always been. He's the smartest person in my house. The boy's been talking over my head since he was 12. And anything that I ever felt like my questions for him, those were my questions. Those were my doubts. And I didn't have a right to put my doubts on him, to project my fears on him. His life's hard enough. I can't imagine waking up every day, looking in the mirror and going, this is not me. This is not who I am. I don't recognize that person, because I lived in a marriage that was like that and hated myself. So I can't possibly imagine my son looking in the mirror every day and saying, this that I'm in doesn't match who I am on the inside. Because aren't we always trying to figure out who we are? We want to live this authentic life. We want to be ourselves. We want to be accepted as ourselves. And for people who are transgender, they're looking at themselves going, I don't fit. I'm a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. And they're trying to figure out the puzzle that they do fit.
So Amber, you said something important, and then Janae asked the perfect question. And Janae, I'm so glad that you asked that, right? Because a lot of viewers are afraid to ask that question. When Amber said, we live in a society today where people just feel the right to ask people's sexuality, your sexual preference. Like, when in the world would you ask me, a mom, your domestic, household wife or something, would you ask me, what are my bedroom preferences? What is my sexual preferences or my sexuality? You wouldn't. You would just make the assumption and you carry on with your life. Now we're in a world where just because someone is transgendered, just because someone has, I hear that. Sorry, there was a little bit of background noise. I'm not sure what it was. We now feel the right to ask these questions. And I want to differentiate. There's a big difference. You can ask questions on how somebody would like to be identified. You can ask people on their gender norms. You can ask those kinds of questions. Now, if you're getting into somebody's sexuality or sexual preferences or very detailed, intimate questions, really, it is not serving you a purpose. It is not serving that person a purpose. This is just because you're curious and you're interested to know. It's a very self-serving approach. And when Janae asked that question, that's actually an educating question. That's an awareness question. When you ask somebody how they like to be identified, that's actually you respecting someone, right? So I think there's a very big difference. And I don't want to shy away people asking questions, but when you want to ask the question, I think I would tell our viewers, or I would share with any of my friends or family, feel open to ask the questions. When we ask questions, we know better and we do better. And then we can educate the rest of our people in our network. But ask yourself a question before you ask the question. Why do you want to know? Is it to educate yourself, or is it because you're just curious?
Crystal, we're getting some background noise. I don't know if it's you or me. I don't know if it's
Let me pause and see if it's
mute. Yeah, mute your mic and see if we still hear it. So I feel that I don't know where that's coming from.
So I muted mine. Somebody else mute their mic.
Yeah, let's try muting the mic and see what happens.
Let's everybody mute their mic.
All right. So I feel that one of the reasons why there's so much backlash too is that not understanding really what's going on. And when people don't understand, they fear what they don't understand. So I am very lucky that I live in an area where Pride Month is celebrated. Here, there's a bunch of stuff going on. You walk into my gym, there's flags everywhere. Like, they go all out. And a lot of the neighborhoods here, the houses, they they've waved the flags proudly. So, oh, somebody on mic, two on mic.
I think we're maybe Amber, try muting. Well, we'll all try muting. Okay.
Yeah, so everybody here, you know, I have friends who are gay, they're married, they're couples, they have families. But even within that community, I have to tell you that there's a lot of confusion. And even though a lot of the friends that I have, you know, have been gay for a long time, of course, and married now with kids, they see confusion in their kids because it's all over. And yes, we talk about the political backlash and the this and the that, but I think that the education, of course, starts at home. And that goes for everybody, because if my gay couple friends who are parents are confused, you know, like what does that say for the rest of us? Because, and I believe too that in this country, yes, we have a lot more freedoms and there's a lot more curiosity, and there is that feeling of having the right to do this and the right to do that and the right to put somebody's, you know, your camera on somebody's face, your phone, and record. Like that's the American culture. That's the American culture, period, right? We don't see that in other countries. When I was growing up, we had gay people, we had transsexuals, and we knew exactly who they were. We could tell, we could identify. It was visual. We didn't have to ask because we knew. Whereas now, I feel like the confusion is so much that you're like, okay, you know, you're trying to figure things out. And then if you say something because you don't know, all of a sudden there's that, you know, they take offense. And that creates another situation. Now you're like, okay, wait a minute, now I can't say anything. Oh, I'm sorry I called you ma'am, or I'm sorry I called you sweetie or honey or whatever, or I'm sorry I said, is that your son? When, you know, of course, there's a lot of confusion. So I feel that, yes, that we can put a lot of blame on people for being ignorant and not wanting to learn, right? But at what point do you actually say, okay, like, how do I educate? And this live is all about education. It's about helping people understand the type of questions to ask and to not be afraid of asking. And the reason why, again, they're afraid of asking is because everybody just takes offense to things. And if you get offended, like all of a sudden you're canceled and oh, that person's not an ally. And I'm telling you this freely because I live in an area where I'm surrounded by all of it. And I do ask the questions, and my gay friends will raise up their voices and they will ask the questions and they will say, this is ridiculous, or yeah, I can totally relate to that, you know, and there's no offense taken by anybody. So I believe that when people start to get their feelings hurt and they get offended by everything, that's when it's like, okay, now what's the point of even asking then if you're not willing to have an intelligent conversation with me? So tell us, Amber, then about that. Like what would you say to people who are having those questions, and how can they feel safe asking the questions? Because it is a two-way street.
I think the first thing, typically, if you're in conversation with someone you don't know, I think it's the same thing as saying, would you prefer I call you Miss or Mrs.? And that's the first step. Like, I think we went way overboard with pronouns. People got all offended with pronouns, like, oh my gosh, he wants to go by a different pronoun. We've been using pronouns. We've been using he, she, they. You're just having to switch it to what this person is asking you to switch it out of respect for them. And that's all that is. It's the same thing as you calling your teacher a ma'am or a sir. You're giving that person respect. And I think when you come at them in a conversation and you approach it as, I don't want to be offensive, but what do I call you? What do you go by? And if you just come with it with that kind of attitude, this open attitude of, I'm trying to make sure that I don't offend you. I've had a few friends of mine who had experiences in hospital settings, and that was really difficult for them because every nurse, every doctor, every CNA would treat them differently. Some of them absolutely would go by what pronouns they wanted. And this person, every time they walked in the room, would give them their name and say, I identify as such, and these are my pronouns, to make it clear. And typically an older person is going to feel that way. They're going to feel strong enough to tell you their pronouns and what to call them because they don't want you to feel uncomfortable in that conversation either. They're addressing you just like they want you to address them. It's kind of just setting up the conversation rules, I guess, in the beginning of the talk. But this person, like every single person that came in, one would be like, I will absolutely call you by what you want. The next one, absolutely not. I don't believe in that. And the thing is that's your belief. That's not them. And their life is not based on your belief. Their life is based on their life. So they exist. So just because you believe in it doesn't mean that you can cancel them out. Doesn't mean you say that they don't exist or that their experiences don't matter, because they do.
So, Amber, I'm glad you said that, because I'm gonna play devil advocate again, because I can hear my friends just chiming in. Jay, so that one person who says they're not going to do it because that's their belief, you know,
Right.
where does the respect for both people's belief factors coming in? I respect you for feeling the way that you feel, and I'm gonna give you a scenario: an alcoholic,
Okay.
for example, a person who doesn't, or just the alcohol realm. You're gonna force them to drink an alcoholic drink when they don't believe in drinking. You're okay.
Right.
They're okay for you to drink, but don't force it on them. They're like, nope, I'm not gonna do it. So
I
when
think
you
my thing
have
is,
that,
is with that, when you're talking about the pronouns, like for this person in the hospital, when that nurse came in and said, I don't believe in it, I'm not going to,
Mhm.
you just violated their rights.
Hmm.
You're a nurse and you just violated that person's rights.
How
I don't
so,
care
though?
what your belief.
Look
I
like?
don't care what your belief is. Your belief is left at the door, because at the hospital, you're a nurse first. Your patient is first.
Right, life.
That's it.
Life is
That's
first, not
it.
pronouns.
That
So they didn't
person is
violate the
first.
right.
That's the person that you're taking care of. You're getting paid to take care of somebody else, not to
Mhm.
insult them. So
Is it
you
insulting?
treat that person that yes, it's very insulting. It's
So if they
adamantly
decided to just
if
call
you
that
flat
person
out
by
tell
their
somebody, if
name,
a person comes in the room and says, I identify as male, I go by he, him, and you continuously call them a female, you are insulting.
oh no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if they don't
That's
want
what
to
that
allow
nurse did.
and they
That's what
can,
that nurse did. The nurse
okay.
came in and said, I'm going to call you by female, regardless of what you want to be called by. That's what that nurse did.
Okay.
That's what I'm
Okay,
saying
okay.
about her belief. Her belief was, I don't care what you want to be called by. Your
I got
your chart says female, so that's what I'm going to call you by. And that was
Ooh,
insulting
yeah.
to him.
Oh,
To him.
see, I'm gonna tell you, in that realm, she's not violating anything. And I'm gonna tell you also how it goes in the military. It's the same way. Until they get it changed on their birth certificate, then they'll address them by what it is that they're addressing. It's just
He had his birth certificate. He had his birth certificate.
Okay.
The hospital had not fixed it in the hospital system.
There you go. So, because I
That's
want
not his
everybody to
problem.
understand,
That's not
audience
his
members,
problem.
be clear. Let's
That's
be
not
clear,
his problem.
audience. So let's get this correct, audience. If in the hospital and your gender is female on what they're tracking on their information, they're going to call you as such until it is changed otherwise, provided by a birth certificate. In the military,
Not necessarily a birth certificate. It doesn't have to be
whatever
a birth
it is,
certificate.
just to prove whatever.
My state, you can go in with your ID
and change it.
I'm gonna say
and if your
whatever,
ID says female,
whatever.
you don't have to go in and have your birth certificate changed to prove to somebody at a hospital to treat you correctly.
Okay,
That's
Amber.
improper patient treatment. Period.
Okay, Amber. Okay, Amber. So now we're gonna say for military too is the same if that's the case. So we're not saying that anybody can come there. The nurse was disrespecting that person because of X, Y, and Z. She had it on whatever what the chart was saying, but the person has something totally different. So again,
I know
the
it varies.
education that
I know
Mary
it varies
Kim
for the
very
military. I know it
masculine.
varies because military is trying to make major changes on how they treat these people because of the backlash that they've gotten. And of course, you've got
Amber,
that is a
one thing
political
about the
pawnship.
military, you
That's a
don't have to
political
tell me about it
pawnship.
because we're walking and living it 26
Yeah,
years.
that's what I'm saying. But
I
every base is
totally
different. Every base
So,
is
Mary,
different.
what you were saying, not base, the regulations are clear across the board, but we're in transition of changing things, but not
Right.
all the way.
And that's what I'm saying.
Mary, what
Each
you
base is at
said-
a different level at this point.
So, Mary, what you said is true. The education of allowing people to understand, because people probably didn't even know that. Y'all didn't even know that all you have to do is show your ID or your birth certificate to show what it is they identify with. And then, hey, that's when you change your terminology from anything going work related or school related.
And I think that's the problem. The problem is these people identify as that before they change their record. And you have politicians and hospital administrations and you have regulations who want to make a bunch of rules on what you have to pass to then be able to say you are who you are. Whereas everybody else comes in the door being treated exactly as they are. And all these people are asking you to respect it.
Amber, okay, so I want to jump in on this. Okay, so Mary, you said something, and I think for my personal opinion, I think people are hung up on way too much of like things that bother them that shouldn't. What do you care on how somebody wants to be identified? What impact does it have on your life? Respect people how they would like to be identified. And this is my personal opinion. However, what Mary brought up, it does become, from somebody who's just wants to know better and do better, they want to ask the questions. And then when we ask the questions and then the person is offended because we mispronounce them or miss their gender pronoun that they prefer, we made that mistake. And then the person who's genuinely just wants to know and do better is received with like a little bit of attitude or a little bit of like, backlash. It makes people uncomfortable to ask the questions because we live in this world. However, I do want to play the devil's advocate, just like Janae, and say, I get it from both perspectives. When you're part of a marginalized population, it's like, why is it my job to educate you? Go to Google.
Right.
But then I also understand from the person's perspective where I just want to learn and know and do better and have the proper language and make sure I'm being inclusive. I want to be able to feel safe and comfortable in asking the questions because I am an ally. I want to support. I want to know and do better. So I know living in the society that we do today, that there is that backlash of like, you should know better. That's actually holding us back from more education and breaking down stigma. But I get it from if I was transgendered, I'd understand how that would frustrate me, how that would be, why is it my job to educate you, right? And so I just want to kind of put that in there because I understand both perspectives. I think we as a whole need to do better. And as a whole, no matter what issue it is, no matter what sensitive topic is, if we don't allow a platform or room to have these open conversations, nobody's going to be able to do better and know better, right?
It's honestly, it's about having that conversation. And if you mispronounce somebody, if you say a wrong gender, say I'm sorry. Like, it's not hard. Like, my son hasn't changed his name. He's still deciding on his name because this is something he will carry the rest of his life. So that makes it difficult at times for me. I will slip into the other pronoun. And every time, as soon as I do it, I'm like, I'm sorry. And I instantly correct it. And that's all they want. Realize that what I did was wrong and I owned it and we move forward. I don't neglect, I don't not say I'm sorry, because if I do that, then it's saying it didn't matter that I misgendered you. And I don't want my kid to think that I was passive and whatever. It doesn't matter, because it does matter. I don't want to be insulted when I'm spoken to. I don't want him to feel insulted when he's spoken to. And I think that's what it comes down to is let's just have a conversation between people. They are people. We are people. And I think if we addressed it in that, we'd be in a much better place. But we do have society. We do have culture. We have family. And some of the biggest things that I find that some of these people have are the person I had that came to me was an oldest child. And a lot of first generation immigrants that come to this country, the male child first is prioritized. It's the most important. And so when that person comes out and says, I'm going to transition to a female, that's a lot harder on that family culturally to accept, because culturally they're top notch because they had a son and they had a son first. And that's what looks great for them. So they're not just having to get away from their bias. They have to get away from their own culture's bias as well to now accept their kids. So you've got to kind of set, okay, this is what my church said. This is what my culture said. This is what my politics said. You have to put all that aside to be able to see your kid as your kid, or to see a person as a person. You have to remove all that stuff. And I think in today's age, it is hard for us to remove that. We have all these different layers that we're all built on, and we're so worried that we're going to offend somebody that we're very careful with our language. And I think a lot of times it should be, we just ask. Just ask. Be polite, but ask. I'm with very much with Mary, what Mary said. That is what I talk about in my room. People fear what they don't know. And if you aren't talking about it, it's very easy for people to go, oh, I don't like that. I don't know about that. Oh, that's because you don't know. Educate yourself. Just like y'all said, you don't, as a marginalized group, you don't want to have these questions constantly. Well, why should I treat you that way? Why do I have to ask this? Why do I have to treat you that way? Why do I speak to you that way? That's the same thing for them.
Amber, go ahead. Camille got a question for you. Go ahead, Camille. Oh, you're on mute, boo. You're on mute.
You guys know I'm the queen of mute and talking. Like, I was like, wait, I'm talking anyways. So I had a question for you, Amber. This is some great information too as well, especially with the pronunciations and what have you. But as a parent of Pride, where can other parents find that support within their community? So if I was a parent that, whose child has just come out or is going through these motions, where can me as a mom, because this is going to be a transition for even a parent,
right?
Just like yourself, you had mentioned that you had seen the signs throughout the years and saw that your son came out as an adult. But there are a lot of parents that get sideswiped. Right?
I'll say the first thing is go to your pediatrician.
It's not in the sense.
Your pediatrician is the first one. Like when I even guessed in high school, and he started, that was more of an agender, asexual, don't really know. And we knew that in high school. And I went to my pediatrician and I was like, I have no resources for this. I don't know where to start with this. He said, yes, you do. That's your kid. That's the first place you start. That's your child, period. Whatever your problem is. And then, Google is your friend. Google, books. You could look for support groups. You could look for on Facebook. Go in and look for, there are pride groups everywhere. And these pride groups are pride groups for parents. They're pride groups for pride members. They're pride groups for allies. There are a lot of people who, their families have rejected them. So in those groups, you can actually sponsor other people and be like the aunt or the mom that shows up at the wedding or the baby shower or whatever special event that they need, somebody to be there for, that they actually don't have family now that will stand in for them. You can be stand-in family. And I know that there's a group on Facebook called Stand in Pride. That is specifically one of those. And those type of groups then will also have all kinds of resources for you to educate yourself for your kid. And that's the biggest piece, because they're already struggling. They don't need your added questions, because they're already trying to figure out everything else on their own. They've got especially if you're talking about a kid. Like when we go through puberty, we already have too much on our plates. And you talk about taking on something like your sexual identity, your gender identity. That's a lot to handle as a kid.
Amber, I have a question for you. How much does therapy play a role in being able to navigate all of this when your child is going through the motions and not necessarily able to express themselves, or even feel how to understand how to talk to their parent? Like, did your son ever go through therapy? Did you go through therapy to be able to?
I went through therapy. I was going through therapy for something else already. So just my marriage had ended and it wasn't good. So I was already going through therapy for that. So I kind of handled that within my therapy. My son didn't do therapy. My son was not confused. My son had never been confused.
No, I'm not saying about confusion.
I'm saying,
let me clarify. Let me clarify the question, because a lot of people do think that the child should go to therapy because they're confused. Right. I'm not saying that. Right. I'm saying therapy as support.
Right. Well, again, my son is not one who who will work with therapy. Like that's not his thing. We tried that. That's not his thing. And some people, that's not their thing. Some people very much need a therapist to walk them hand in hand. And I would recommend that if you go into your pediatrician, that's probably the first thing that's going to happen is if this comes out and your child is a child, you're going to go to your pediatrician. And the pediatrician is probably going to recommend some kind of family therapist that can talk with the parents and talk with the child, probably separately, maybe together, to kind of navigate and see where everybody is on this page. Is it just a curiosity? Is there confusion? Or are you really starting to identify as something other than yourself? And that is something that a lot of people do need a lot of navigation through. It's scary. It's very scary. And on top of that, it comes with a lot of anxiety. It comes with a lot of depression.
Yes,
and that is another reason why we talk about bringing
all
in
of the external, everything that's coming out at you, because no matter what you're going through, whether you're having issues at work or issues in your relationship, it doesn't matter. Like all of these external circumstances can really impact people's mental health. And then when you have this situation on top of that, this is why there's like so much going on. They fall into addiction. They end up with suicidal tendencies. So this is why, like, I'm always a proponent for this sort of thing. And if your son didn't do it, you know, that's fine and all. But for those of you who are watching, who do have children who are going through all of this, just to help them understand themselves a little bit more, and also to kind of develop that mental toughness that they need in order to be able to navigate all of the things that are coming, because just because we're having the conversation doesn't mean that it's going to stop. Okay, so we have to be realistic. And depending on where you live in the United States, it can be a lot harder. There are still going to be people who understand and people who are really, really judgmental and hurtful. So being able to have a safe space to understand and have the mental tools that you need is very, very important. So those of you who are parents right now going through this, because the topic was supposed to be parenting with pride, and we kind of like went way off the topic. And I really just want to bring it back in and remind parents and also friends of parents who have children to just be there, to be a support, to listen, to be curious, and to also not get offended when these things happen. So I'm just going to use my mic.
That's awesome, Mary. I love it, because one of the things that I was going to say is sometimes when you don't know, I'm going to tell you what I do. What's your name? And your name is what I go with, you know, and I do purposely avoid he, she, because in the military, I had so many friends transitioning over, and it was kind of overwhelming for me. And so I just call them battle, or, you know, they name, and I just stick with that. So when you don't know, when in doubt, just use their name, you know, use their name. That you never can go wrong with calling somebody their name, period. All right. So that is absolutely the most phenomenal thing. This was a great segment. I would absolutely agree with Mary. It's parenting with pride, and it's about, you know, who have children who are coming out in this society where there is some confusion. There's not a lot of understanding, but the more we know, the more we grow. And it's going to be, I don't think you know, I'm not a fortune teller, but I do know history. And in history, things happen. When things happen, when people don't understand, it's like for a time period. And then once it gets to the understanding, life goes with the new changes that are going through, and it grows on. And we are overcome. We are an adaptive type of a society. That's one thing I can say based off history. So this is just a time. It is not forever in the present or future or whatever. It's just a here and now, and we're going to work it out. And then everything will go and will be going to, when we get through this together and understanding and empowering one another. So Amber, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your son's experience, and your journey, and how it is happening right now, because you are definitely helping someone who's been in that, is currently in that position, understand their child coming out, you know, and being that supportive. Because you said something that I really, really, really want you to say again, when it says, hey, they're your child. When it's all said and done, they are your. So look past everything else and look and see your child. Thank y'all for attending.
I love how you just ended this live, Janae. It is so true. At the end of their child, at the end of the day, they're your child. And all of us moms and dads and parents just want to be prideful of our kids. So get the support, get the resources, get the education. Amber, continue to do the work that you are doing and spreading awareness, breaking down stigma, and impacting the lives of other parents around the world. We are getting ready to jump off this Women Let's Talk About It corner. Incredible segment. We are jumping on our LinkedIn live audio room right now for our famous Women Supporting Women networking room for female entrepreneurs to connect, collaborate, and scale our businesses together through the power of collaboration. So join us there. We're jumping off now, and tune back in with us next Thursday as we talk to you about the CRM system that we don't even like to call CRM, but the one-stop shop, the one system that will literally change your business game. It is business domination time discussion next Thursday here at the Women's Let's Talk About It corner. Bye for now, everyone.
Shout out to W in our comments and tuning in. I see you, girl. You popping in there. We love all your comments and all your shares. Thank you.